So, welcome you all on the international lecture series. Today, we are going to have our ninth international lecture series conducted by Sherlock Institute of Forensic Science and with the collaboration or the support of the Forensic Training Unlimited. Today, we have with us Terri Armenta, and she is going to talk about the unusual work accident, forensic challenges in evidence collection. So I welcome Terri for this session and thank you for accepting our invitation for giving such a informative talk on an unusual topic, which is many times it is not covered by. So let's introduce Terri to all. She is a professor at Mount St. Mary University. She has been teaching for close to 20 years, especially in forensic science, criminal investigation, criminal justice courses, as well as a career mentor. During this time, she has been an adjunct professor for several colleges, guest lecturer for major organizations, and have had the pleasure teaching students of various ages and backgrounds. She is a founder of Forensic Training Unlimited LLC and a very popular institute and provide many online trainings and courses. You can find their courses on Udemy and they are on the Forensic Science Academy website. So with this, Terri, I'd like to inform you that we have a registration of 4,800 plus participants from 58 plus countries and 600 organizations. Many are watching through the YouTube live. Today we have in a room many people. So these are the people, these are the country from we have the participants and the list are many more. So we display a few country where we have from where we have the participants. So I once again I welcome Terri on this accepting our invitation and ready to give a lecture on this. So I request you to start your session.
Thank you so much. Good evening to everybody. It's morning time here in Southern California. I'm an early bird, so this is nothing for me. I wanted to say thank you everyone for registering and participating here. It is my blessed pleasure and honor to be able to give this presentation to you. I'm recognizing a lot of familiar names that I've connected with over the years, as well as having some of your students now becoming some of my students. But I wanted to review this presentation with all of you because the challenges that crime scene investigators or investigators face is quite unique depending upon the case, right? So this particular case takes the viewpoint of the coroner side and the challenges that they had to face in this particular case. So I'm going to share my screen so all of you can see the presentation, and then we'll get started just a little bit. And I know that we're going to have a little bit of question and answer, so please write down your answers, put them in the chat room, your questions, put them in the chat room, and then we'll get to those. Because again, this particular case does have a lot of scene photos, and I need to explain the processes of those particular photos, all right? So just please be patient with me and let's get started. Some of the topics that I'm going to be covering is, of course, I'm going to introduce myself just a little bit more so I can give you a little bit of background of my specialized training, as well as my affiliations with some of the forensic organizations that I'm involved with. We will review just some fun facts, as I call it, from Los Angeles County Coroner, the office there. I spent some time there, about 3 years, being an assistant in the autopsy floor. At that time, we could do that. And then I'm going to give you the case background, as well as we will view the scene photos, and then, of course, open it up to any type of discussions. There I am. I don't think I've changed too much. I am a university professor. I've been teaching online since about 2012. I'm an adjunct professor at Mount St. Mary's University, and that is a private college in Los Angeles, California, and I teach their criminalistics courses there. I am an educator as well as a mentor to all of my students, trying to guide them and show them the ways, and not only to get a career in forensic science, but what type of education and training is needed to get into forensic science. I am a member and executive board member of SCAFO, which is the Southern California Association of Fingerprint Officers. I've held that position since latter part of December 2019, but I've been a member of that organization for many years, as well as a member of the IAI, which is the International Association for Identification, and the state division of the California division of the IAI, as well as the California Coroner State Organization of Coroners. I've been a contributing writer for several magazines, the latest one being Death Investigator. That was an e-magazine that was produced up until I think March of this year. And I've received specialized training, not only in law enforcement, but as well as forensic science. As I said before, I spent some time, and I say that fondly, at the coroner's office. And I have education, not only a master's in forensic science, but I'm in my second year for my PhD in education, specifically in distance learning, because that is, I believe, the way to go when we're conducting training courses and seminars such as this. I am the director of the Forensic Science Academy, which is a hands-on training program located here in Southern California. It offers over 200 hours of hands-on training for students. We have had students from actually all over the world to come to our 6-month program, and that program has been in existence since about 1998. And then around 2012, I decided to do another business sort of to supplement the hands-on training, and that is Forensic Training Unlimited, which offers online courses for all. So that's a little bit about me. I hope you enjoyed that. That's a picture of me taken not too long ago. I was at a conference and we were trying to figure out what was best, the microsil or the translucent gun. So that was just a fun picture. I've also authored this particular guide for students who are looking to get a career in forensic science. Again, it is quite challenging for students. And I'm sure that if students are here in this presentation, you understand those challenges. And then the experts that are here as well, hopefully you won't forget how challenging it once was. I think today it's more challenging more than ever. A couple of photos from me when I was at the coroner's office. On the left, obviously that's me. And one of my former students who went through the academy and now is a screenplay writer, and her claim to fame is that she's written a book that acts as a guide for individuals, writers and screenplay writers that want to write correctly in a forensic related event, TV show, things like that. And then again, there's me on the right with another coworker of mine at the coroner's office. One of the things that I must remind everybody, and again, if the experts out there, I'm sure you will agree to this, and students that are out there, is if you remember the ABCs of investigations, you will never be wrong in your investigative process. You want to assume nothing, okay? Don't assume that something has happened when it could be something else. You don't want to believe anyone, believe no one, because you have to do your own investigation. And you want to check everything, because sometimes what it says or what somebody's telling you may not be all absolutely true. I think we've all experienced that. So if you remember your ABCs, then you will make sure that investigative bias doesn't play into your investigative processes. Some of these examples that I use that you're seeing now is I try to tell my students that just because it appears to be that the individual on the right may have been run over, exactly what does that scene tell you? And can you tell from certainty that indeed that's what happened? And usually the students will say, well, of course that's what happened. That's what it looks like. But if that's what it appears to be without additional information, you're kind of left looking and assuming that that may have happened. The picture on the left, usually students will say, you know, hey, I think that's a suicide because there's definitely a note there and it looks peaceful and calm. Again, sometimes what we're seeing is not altogether true. So I just put those examples in just as a reminder to all of you that don't let your presumptions or assumptions guide you in this investigation or whatever investigation you might find yourself in. Even though crime scene investigations and investigators may work by themselves, law enforcement, first responders, we're all part of a team that will go, that the whole goal is to make sure that the scene has been reconstructed and evidence has been collected in a manner that brings together all the aspects of our investigative team. And investigative team can be many, many people, many, many things, witnesses, first responders, of course, detectives, law enforcement, coroner investigators, crime scene investigators, anything and anyone that brings in information to that particular case, because not one person can do it all. And I think we all know it's not like the TV shows that I think we've all been exposed to. I think that's just for entertainment. So as I said before, witnesses, medical personnel, and in this case that I'm going to present, it had to do with workers as well as witnesses that ended or put in information that helped the investigators piece together exactly what had happened or may have happened to this particular individual in the workplace. And the case really takes place, it was an outdoor scene, but the individual who died was working for a city here in Los Angeles County. So it is still considered a workplace accident. Here's some information about LA County coroners, our square miles that LA County covers. It conducts a little bit more than 7,500 autopsies a year. It is quite busy. It's one of the busiest coroner offices here in California. There are other agencies that are busy as well, but LA County's pretty much got the coroner market, if you will, on how many autopsies they do per year. It investigates obviously John and Jane Doe's, and it covers a wide range of all the cities that are located in LA County. We have another county, San Bernardino County, that is quite as busy, Riverside County, as well as Orange County. Those are the ones I'm most familiar with. So again, the processes may be the same, but individual steps, unique training is sometimes very different from agency to agency. Of course, the coroner for LA County, not all medical examiner offices can have or do have their own staff that's related to photography. We have consultants for forensic anthropology, evidence custodians. So most for LA County, and that's what I'm going to focus on, we have specialized subsections of the department that some other coroner offices may not have due to money and personnel and really budget. Sometimes it does come down to budget. Of course, each coroner's office will examine and investigate natural causes, buried bodies. The one on the picture on the very right was one that I was quite amazed about. I've seen it, and I'm sure you have seen it too. Individuals that have been buried or hidden in areas or in remote areas that people may not suspect. I've seen decedents pushed in and squished in canisters, suitcases, and in that case, a mattress. So it's unique in such a way that you have to not be surprised of what you're seeing. These days, I'm not surprised of anything that comes my way or I'm reading about. It's just that's the nature of unfortunately the business and the expertise that we lend ourselves to. So this case has to do with a wood chipper. If you're not familiar what a wood chipper is, its main purpose is to pulverize in a way all the branches and debris that it's being fed into. So wood chipper, imagine, and I have a picture of it, it has this big mouth and the branches of whatever's being cut is fed through that mouth, and then it's pulverized and it's shoot out into another area. And in this particular case, it was the debris was put into being shot into a truck, a collection truck. The wood chipper in question is a commercial grade wood chipper. There's smaller ones for personal use if you're living out in an area that you need to cut down these branches and trees. And then in this case, a commercial one, which is much bigger. Let me show you that picture. It looks something like this, similar to this. Over here is where it's actually shooting out all the debris, okay? And here is the mouth, if you will, of the wood chipper itself. So branches, limbs are fed into here. It goes through this process. There's a big rotating drum and it's shot out through here, usually again into another collection device. And in this case, it was this big truck. So here is the case background. Our decedent, Mr. Rafael Jimenez, he worked as a tree trimmer for a city here in California for many, many years. And his primary duties were to collect the branches and the debris that was being trimmed from another individual that was on a cherry picker. And that's a elevated platform, and that raises an individual up to the tree length, the height. So they worked in tandem. An individual was usually on that cherry picker, trimming the tree branches, cutting the tree branches and the limbs, and then that debris would fall, and then Mr. Jimenez would take that debris, those branches, those limbs, and feed it into the wood chipper. So in that type of environment, one person couldn't do it themselves. They needed that partner to do it. So those two individuals did work well together, and they worked for a very, very long time. This case takes place April 2008. So many years ago, about 20 years ago, maybe not that much, 2008, in April. So there were two eyewitnesses to this case. One was Charles Stroud. He was the actual driver of a vehicle that was passing by. So let me set up, before I get into that, let me set up the scene. So you have Mr. Jimenez and the wood chipper on the ground, and then you have Mr. Jimenez's work partner up on a cherry picker up high, trimming those branches and those limbs. The limbs would be falling. Mr. Stroud is, and this is taking place in a residential area with nice homes. And the two individuals, again, worked for a city called Inglewood, California, here in LA County. So Mr. Stroud is driving by. It's in the morning, driving by, and he witnesses that at one point, Mr. Jimenez is there, and in the flash of just a blink of an eye, he's gone. Mr. Stroud pulls over, gets out, and starts yelling up top to the coworker on the cherry picker. Hey, listen, you know what? Come on down, come on down. Now, the coworker, he's got his headphones on because, again, he is using equipment to cut the branches, right? So you've got to protect your hearing. He comes on down, and where is Mr. Jimenez? They look inside the wood chipper mouth, and they can see blood, okay, blood and debris. And it's at that point that first responders, law enforcement, were called. There is another witness. He is a crossing guard, but again, none of those two individuals actually saw Mr. Jimenez going into or being pulled into the wood chipper. So even though they didn't see the actual event, these two individuals did have information for the investigators in order to provide a guidance, if you will, exactly what may have happened. Now, at this point, we only know two things. One is that Mr. Jimenez was working, right? And two, he is now gone. Now, we could safely assume that something has happened because when you looked into, and I will show you the pictures, you looked into the mouthpiece of the wood chipper, there's blood, debris, in tissue, right? So again, are you going to assume that something that Mr. Jimenez went in there? Our common sense will tell us yes, but on an investigative point, you have to be thorough and you have to investigate what the facts are telling you. So again, we can, common sense tells us, yes, that something has happened. Preliminary discovery and investigation, the body of Mr. Jimenez is wrapped in that wood chipper. And the first responders, as I said before, and I will again show you the scene pictures, they discovered debris, tissue, and blood all over that wood chipper entrance of the mouth. So at this point, we only know that Mr. Jimenez is now missing. This case will profile or give you, as I said before, a bird's eye view of what happened on the coroner side, not the crime scene investigation side. Because in this case, there were more investigators than you would suspect, because again, since it's a workplace accident, they have their own set of investigators, correct? First responders, they're going to investigate that as well. And then on the backside for decedents, we have the medical legal investigators, the coroner investigators. So I always say when I present this, please note the time. We're at 21:20 on April 8th, 2008. The pictures will show you as we move forward in the case, exactly how long it took. I mean, this was many, many hours. So let me just kind of describe what is going on here. You see, again, this is on the back end. Here is the wood chipper. And at this point, stations were set up so the attendants and criminalists of the coroners, they could start sifting through and sorting through the tree debris, the branches, and anything that was coming from that wood chipper, because we are looking for human tissue, bone fragments, any type of identification, personal identification items, anything of that we could determine and solidify that this indeed was Mr. Jimenez. Because we need to make sure that we identify definitely his ID, because we can't assume that was Mr. Jimenez, right? Logic tells us, but again, we need to do our due diligence and make sure that indeed what was him. Here is the picture, both of these, is the actual truck. Again, remember, as I point out here, this is the chute of the wood chipper, and this is where all the debris is coming from and shooting into the opening of this truck. This is the scene, this is the scene. Now, in large pieces of evidence, because the truck is considered a piece of evidence, as well as the wood chipper is considered a piece of evidence, these two items needed to be transported to the coroner's office, because we're not going to do any type of investigations on a residential street, right? That could introduce cross-contamination, let alone the people who might be interested in, we call them here in California, the looky-loos. They'll stop in the middle of the freeway to look what has happened on the other side of the freeway, and then that causes more collisions and accidents. So you have to look and be mindful of all that. But again, because these are two large pieces of evidence, they needed to be transported, and they were, to the coroner's office. So then we could do our own investigation there. And what you're looking at is part of the process. They're sifting through and looking for any bone fragments, tissue, and then using old school methods, right? The best one is buckets, okay? And then these buckets would be taken to another station where more sifting, more observation, more picking out of any type of personal identification that could add to the investigation. This is one of the trucks for the coroner's office. We have some new ones now, but again, you can see part of the wood chipper here. And Both the truck and the wood chipper, they were transported to the rear of the coroner's office because you don't want to call attention to what we might be doing processing wise in the front. Because again, people are curious about that. Unauthorized people might be looking and taking pictures. And I think it goes without saying, when you're investigating a case and there's media around, cameras, cell phones, you have to compose yourself and be as professional as possible, because if they see you smiling or you're hearing a joke, because sometimes you need levity in cases, and you're laughing, that you don't want to be that person captured on camera. So we want to do it as discreetly as possible. Again, note the time, we're at 21:21. So you see here the actual wood chipper and just some more of the processes that were taken in order to collect the evidence in the manner that it was found in. And just another shot of the buckets that were used. But it was a painstaking process that took many, many hours, because you need, like I said, you need to imagine that mixed with grass, leaves, wood, there is body tissues, body fluids, remnants, clothing. So it was quite a painstaking endeavor that obviously needed to be done in order to gain as much evidence as possible for this case. Because I tell my students, you've got to look forward. You don't know where this case might be going. You don't know if it's going to go into litigation. And that is what all the cases, because your primary duty, let's say as a crime scene investigator, is to collect, process, document, or report. But then you may not be called upon to testify until years afterwards. So you focus in on the primary duties for that case at that time, and then you're called on to another case. So in a sense, that's what the coroner investigators do as well. You can't focus on what the aspects might happen immediately, but you have to be mindful that those processes, the next step, meaning case litigation, may or may not happen. So you need to be thorough as much as possible in whatever case you are doing. So you see the drum here, and just again, some tree branches and some tree leaves here. And we get some closer shots. We can see that drum, and we start seeing some bodily tissue, right? Blood stains. So the drum is this thing, it's this constant moving, because it's pushing the branches and the tree leaves, pushing it through, so it can be pulverized in order to get this dust, mist in smaller pieces in order to be shot out into, in this case, the truck. Here is the actual drum that you're seeing. Again, it's mixed with tree branches, and now we start seeing tissue of various sorts and to degrees, and of course, blood. It is everywhere in this chipper and in this drum. The problem was you need to collect the drum to get collect the evidence, but you need to get the drum out. The city of Inglewood, as well as the technicians who maintain this machine, did not want to take a hold of that. So they had to actually call the manufacturer of the wood chipper in order for them to take apart the wood chipper and get this drum out. And I have a video of them getting the drum out for you. More close-up shots. So the challenges of this type of case are twofold: getting large pieces of evidence into a processing area, and two, collecting evidence which you may not know what you're looking at. At this point, yes, we can see that there is tissue, bodily fluid, blood, but to put together and put a bigger picture on exactly what you might be looking at this point, that is a bigger challenge that no one could actually solve, only because, again, a wood chipper, its main purpose is to pulverize. And as we go through the pictures, you can see this pulverization and this stretching and pulling and just pulling away the tissue. So unfortunately, to see what you might be collecting was not very clear. As the pictures go on, you will see a more definition of some of the evidence, the body evidence, but you can also see here, it's all caked together, pressed together with this drum, and it's all rotated in this drum. Also in this picture, you can see a little bit of something that I will discuss a little bit later. You can see the pictures, but just keep this item in mind. But you can see it all over here. So the purpose is you need to get this drum out. And again, nobody wanted to volunteer for that. Just some more pictures, more scenes of the actual blood stain evidence and how the tissue, especially on the left, was put in or found in all around the drum, as well as in the nooks and crannies. So again, the branches and things like that, because they are of a solid texture, they're being pushed through, but tissues, because they're more pliable, it's everywhere. It was everywhere in this drum. More pictures here. You can start seeing just the depth of how and where and everywhere these samples, these pieces of evidence were found. And it took a while, because if you can imagine, it's not just in a concentrated place. Let's say, for example, you're a crime scene investigator, you go into a room and there's an individual who committed suicide. Of course, the bloodstain evidence, the bloodstain patterns, and the blood spatter is just contained in that room. But here in this case, it was everywhere. It was on the drum, in the truck, outlining the truck, right outside of where the individual was pulled through. I mean, it was just everywhere. So again, the primary purpose for the coroner's office is to take pictures and document the evidence as it was found in the chipper as well as in the truck. So there's another part of the story, is that there's another part of investigators that are doing their part, interviewing the witnesses, obviously notifying the family, notifying City of Inglewood. So they have their own part in the investigation. And because this is a workplace accident, again, there's another set of investigators as well. The picture on the right, please take notice and concentrate on that. It just shows how much of that tissue was found in the chute that was coming out of, that was going into the other truck. And I show these pictures it's not for obviously entertainment, but to show you the challenges that all of us face as investigators, whether you're in crime scene or as a coroner investigator, trying to piece together, no pun intended, of what exactly happened in this particular case, or in the cases that you're assigned to. As we get deeper and deeper into the wood chipper, you can see more and more of the tissue that was collected, and in mass and bulk. Now we're looking down into the chipper itself, and you see, as I pointed out a couple of photos ago, you start seeing items, evidence of some pieces that you can recognize, like clothing, things like that. So, and that is important because again, our primary purpose is to identify this individual, which we assume, and logically we can assume it's Mr. Jimenez, because he is, again, nowhere to be found, and he started working on this wood chipper, for doing his daily duties. just the massive amount of tissue here. Just another screenshot, pictures, again, using buckets collected. It was brought to this particular area, and then painstakingly, you have to start sorting through each. The amount of tissue, and in this case, clothing, we have to clear that drum. That was the purpose. We have to clear the drum. Because once that drum was out, then we could find and get and collect more evidence as well. So you can see blood. This is where the wood chipper is. You can see it, and here you can see the chute here, and then again here. So there was another case that you should all be aware of. It was the Helene Crafts case. That was a wood chipper case as well. Helene, I think Helene Crafts and Richard Crafts, they were married and not in a very happy marriage. And she decided to divorce him. And lo and behold, he rented a wood chipper. He killed his wife, rented a wood chipper, and chipped her body through in the middle of a snowstorm. And I believe he was just recently released from prison, I believe a couple of months ago. So those are the only two, this case and that, the Helene Crafts case are probably the two cases that I'm most familiar with the use of a wood chipper. I'm sure there's many others, but that those were the two ones that I referenced to. You can see the picture on the right. This is one of the chute holes that the pictures that I had seen before with all the blood and the tissue debris. And please note the time. We're now the next day, almost at 2 a.m. Okay? So that's how long it took to get as much evidence as possible from this particular event. Because you want to make sure that not only do you collect all the evidence belonging to this individual, and I'm meaning his body parts and tissues, but you need to make sure that your investigative process is thorough as well. You don't want to leave any of that behind. And honestly, I don't know what happened with the wood chipper. I don't know if it went back to city of Inglewood, but for a while, obviously it's considered evidence, so we needed to keep that. It's just a short video. So let me just play it again, because you have to see that these workers, they don't belong to the coroners. These are the actual individuals that were called upon to take apart this wood chipper. So the drum is out, and then that gives us the affordability to collect even more tissues. More of what was collected. Just a very sorry state of events. This individual did not need to lose his life, and I will explain the litigation that happened afterwards, because you would suspect that there should be some litigation that was followed through. Here is the actual chute, it coming out. And again, you can see the blood stain tissues and more of the same that what I've described previously. And you can see the actual chipper, the back. Again, they've taken out the drum, and this is the shooting part that it shoots into the truck. The drum is out, as I said before, and again, you see it mixed with blood and tree remnants. And that could not have been done by a technician, because again, the technicians that weren't aware, the coroner technicians weren't aware, and nor did they have any knowledge how to take this drum out. It needed an expert from the actual wood chipper manufacturer. So that's why I said that sometimes your investigative team includes people that normally may not be even thought of. So the eyewitnesses in this case, as well as the technicians that maintain the wood chipper, those are part of the investigative team, right? Because they can give you the information that you need. Who knows the intricacies and the operating system and how the whole machinery is for a wood chipper? I mean, I don't know. After this case, I had somewhat knowledge, but I'm not the expert as these individuals were. So who would know how to take the drum out and disassemble the wood chipper? So that you have to call on other people to help you in your investigative process. Just some more pictures of the technicians that helped in this particular scene. We have the coroner individuals here in the the light blue, and then the technicians that were called upon or to assist. And please, again, let's note the time. We're at 3:25. Okay, that's a long time. As we go deeper into, and now, as I said, the drum is out, we can start now seeing what appears to be actually the clothing of Mr. Jimenez mixed with tissue evidence and tree debris and tree trunks and just leaves and things like that. And let me get you a closer view, because the thing is, it's important to note, as this picture shows, you have to identify that this indeed was Mr. Jimenez. The best way we were looking for is a fingerprint. What were the chances of that? Very low. But most uniforms we have our names on it. I know the uniform that I wear has my name on it and a particular number that's associated with my account, because they scan our uniforms for inventory control. So with the number that you see on these pictures, that can be traced back to Mr. Jimenez's account, uniform account, and then that can give a great sample or source of personal identification. Because at this point, again, we know that Mr. Jimenez is missing. Logically, we can say he was pulled through the wood chipper, but we need that confirmation for personal identification. And this is what this happened, and then this also added to identifying Mr. Jimenez. And you want to take this type of photos because you want to show documentation that, yes, this is what we found. And his uniform was there, as well as his boots, his shoes, his work shoes, I'm sorry. They're steel-toed shoes, so those were not pulverized. And then his underwear, because you go back to, in this case, the wife and say, Mrs. Jimenez, what type of underwear did your husband wear? Do you have others that he had worn? And you can kind of match that up to see if that indeed was him. And that gives you more evidence to link what you've collected to the person that it belongs to. Again, the picture on the right, his feet were intact, ankles were intact because it's sheared off there. There's another picture of that. Okay. So, and that was found in the wood chipper as well. It's important to note, again, you're in the mindset that I need to see whether or not this case is going to be moving forward, and I'll probably be a part of that. So you want to be mindful and look forward to the aspects of a conclusion of a case. It might not happen at that point, but it's going to happen. So you want to take, obviously, the pictures of the bottom of the shoes. We always do that because you want to see if there's any type of damage, any type of slippage. If indeed, hey, do these shoe impressions match up a shoe impression that was found at the scene? Those types of things. So you can see on the picture on the right, you see some clothing remnants from his underwear, and then of course the bottom of his shoes. And please note that all these pictures, we did not take that his feet are still intact, enclosed in the shoes. You don't want to do that without really the forensic pathologist there, because again, this is all pieces of evidence. Before I go how you can contact me, because that kind of ends it, I want to explain to you the litigation of what had happened. Of course, Mr. Jimenez is declared dead. This is a workplace accident. Mrs. Jimenez files suit against the city of, as well as the manufacturer of the wood chipper, and rightfully so. So here were the arguments. The wood chipper company, Moorpark, says that Mr. Jimenez was feeding the branches incorrectly. So instead of feeding it from the side of the wood chipper, Mr. Jimenez must have been feeding it in front of the wood chipper, somehow got caught and then got pulled through. Mrs. Jimenez says, and her team says, that without any fail-safe systems or safety measures in place, of course that were to happen. And because the wood chipper didn't have that, the wood chipper manufacturer is at fault. So the court finds that yes, indeed, because there were no safety measures such as an emergency stop or any type of shield or barrier preventing an individual from feeding any of the branches or tree trunks or anything that in front of the wood chipper, because again, according to training records, both individuals, the operator and Mr. Jimenez, were trained to feed the debris and branches from the side, not from the front. But who's to say, because there were no eyewitnesses to have seen Mr. Jimenez go through or where he was standing. So the court upheld the judgment for in favor of Mrs. Jimenez and found that Moorpark was, the manufacturer was indeed at fault. Now, moving forward, if you look at wood chippers, and I looked up some of the wood chippers now, they've got all these safety measures in place. Remember, this was in 2008. So sometimes safety measures were more of an explanation. You shouldn't do this and don't put your hands in that, versus what it is now. Most companies will take that extra step, not only for training, but also to put up measures in place or barriers in place, such as a safety bar. So if you were to get caught, you can hit that safety bar with your leg, or and that's some type of nature of that. Some of the industrial accidents that are happening today, it's usually because of unfortunate circumstances. I know there was a case a few years back that an individual here in California somehow got caught. It was in a tuna manufacturing or processing plant, and somehow got caught in the tuna baking oven, you know, things like that, or people that aren't aware of, they're working in tandem and they're not aware where their partner is standing and they hit the button, and then all of a sudden, you know, something happens. There was a case that there were two people working, laying down some sheet metal, and one operator got out of the way to start the process of this large press to come down, but his coworker was still there adjusting the stainless steel plate, and then it just crushed him because his coworker didn't see that he was still in the way. So sometimes operator error, but again, in this case, they deemed there was no operator error because the manufacturer was at fault because there was no safety measures in place. So moving forward, when you're investigating things like this, you have to be, again, I always stress, you have to be mindful of where this might be going and how your part in it is going to play in a litigation process. And you want to be thorough, whether you're a crime scene investigator or, as in the coroner, document, photograph, sketch, record, do your reports thoroughly, because again, that's going to help whatever the case might be as it moves forward through the judicial system or in a civil matter. So I think I'm not one for to say, oh yeah, go sue, but in this case, I think Mrs. Jimenez had every right. Unfortunately, this happened and he lost his life from that, but the outcome was a positive one because of a couple of things. Evidence was collected. We were able to personally identify, that this was Mr. Jimenez. Fail-safe measures, safety measures were put in place. And hopefully this made a good impression of what not to do. It's a good example of what companies should not be doing. But they need to make sure that the operators are safe in whatever fashion that might look like. There's where you can get a hold of me. You can find me on social media. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I know many of you are asking me for friend requests on Facebook. My apologies, I have not been on Facebook a lot lately, just kind of focusing on some of the sessions I've been teaching. So I will get to you, and I'm so honored and blessed that you would consider connecting with me on Facebook. So there you go. I'm open for questions. I love questions, and we can discuss some of the aspects of this case or anything else you may have interest in. Anybody? Oh, I can't hear you. Yes, please ask him. Unmute yourself. You're welcome.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm saying that question is, what are the challenges in collecting samples in that type of cases?
The challenges are a few things. Yes, you do have what's right in front of you, but the challenges in this particular case is that you needed to call upon other individuals in order to collect all the evidence there. And exactly what are you looking at? When you're at, let's say, a triple homicide case, you would suspect to see firearm, casings, things like that, and that's recognizable, correct? But in a case like this, what are you exactly looking at? You see tissues, right? That's it. So the challenges are this: you have to collect whether or not you recognize it or not, because as a forensic professional, you can't just assume, well, it's just, I know it's tissue, but who cares? So the challenges are that it's not recognizable, but you collect it anyway, because you're looking at a piece of an individual versus what is recognizable, let's say an ear, a nose, a fingerprint. So challenges exist because, again, you may not know or recognize exactly what you're collecting. In car accidents, traffic collisions, an individual's limb, could be there. Of course, you're going to collect that and it looks like a limb. But in this case, what does it really look like? It looks like a bunch of body tissue. So that's a major challenge when you have these types of cases, workplace cases, that you just can't recognize, discern exactly what you're collecting.
Yeah, Dr. Yudi has a question from Indonesia. Dr. Yudi, you can ask your question.
Okay, good evening. Thank you so much, Professor Terri, for your presentation. I would like to ask you, did the investigators do the DNA testing in this case?
They did not do DNA testing in this case, and here's the reason why. It was they were able to get a positive, quote unquote, positive identification based on his underwear, his shoes, his clothing, and specifically because there was that serial number on his uniform. So no DNA testing.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Benny, you can ask your question. Benny Sharma.
Yes, ma'am, good evening.
Good evening. Oh, good morning. Yeah. Good morning here. Good evening to you.
Yeah, ma'am, very nice session, first of all. And my second question is that I have done my graduation in journalism and would like to have a career in forensic science. Then how can I go about it? What do you suggest?
So I get that question often, and thank you for asking it. And I I love answering this question. So one of the first things you need to determine, and I always coin the word, you got to get laser focused. What aspect in forensic science? There's so many disciplines within that umbrella. So of course there's crime scene investigations, right? There's forensic accountants, forensic engineering, there's photography. Of course there's medical legal investigations, you know, the death investigator. So you need to get focused exactly where you want to go, because that will determine what type of education you need. So for example, if you want to work in a crime lab, you're going to have degrees in hard sciences, such as myself, chemistry, biochemistry, things like that. But if you're going to work as a crime scene investigator, those requirements may not be necessary. It may be that you can have a degree in criminal justice. So that's the first step. What aspect of forensic science or what discipline do you want to get into? So many. There's veterinary forensics now, you know, for people who unfortunately have to investigate.
I'm sorry, I'm cutting you down, ma'am, because I have never studied forensic science before. This is the first time I'm studying this subject, but I really want to make a career inside it. So how can I go about it? Like, especially if I want to become your student, then what to do about it?
So my first recommendation is to start researching and exploring the forensic disciplines that are available to you, and there are many. So for instance, as I mentioned, crime scene investigation. Do you want to work in a crime lab? That's something different altogether. Do you want to work in corporate as an investigator? Do you want to work for the legal system as an investigator? So that's the first thing. Start researching or email me, and I will be more than happy to give you a step-by-step of what I recommend students should do in order to really get focused on a forensic related or a forensic career. Because there's so many things that we can do with forensics, applying the forensic process to everyday corporate or industry fields and positions. I know it's probably not the answer you're looking for, but it's so much that I can give to you that I could probably spend another hour on here giving you a pathway to for you to focus in on what forensic discipline you want to do. So contact me.
Yes, ma'am. We'll definitely email you and talk to you about it.
Yes, you can.
Yeah, you can ask your question.
Hi, ma'am. Good evening. Thank you for such amazing in this webinar.
Thank you.
Regarding this case, was there any toxicology tests conducted?
No, actually, that's a great question. There was no DNA or toxicology because, again, this is a workplace accident, and even though that should have been done in 2008, it was not done.
Ma'am, it could have been a homicide case as well. Why didn't they conduct toxicology?
It could have been a homicide case. So I'm not privy to the other side of it, why it wasn't done, toxicology or DNA. Yes, it could have been homicide, but the investigation took us to, all the evidence led us to that this was a workplace accident. Also, there was not anybody near him because his coworker said it was just him and Mr. Jimenez working together on that wood chipper or that event. Remember, the coworker was up top, cutting down branches, and there was nobody around Mr. Jimenez. Okay, so even the crossing guard said there was nobody around Mr. Jimenez. So the crossing guard was across the street, and then Mr. Stroud was the one that was driving through. Again, there was nobody around him, Mr. Jimenez.
Was there any evidence to prove those two witnesses were innocent?
Yeah, they had nothing to do with it. There was no, again, Mr. Stroud was driving through his neighborhood. He lived in the neighborhood, and the crossing guard, he was doing his job. He was, it was a weekday.
Yeah.
School was in session. He has to stay there because he's a crossing guard. I understand what you're going through because that's how what you're saying, because that's how my mind goes. Well, how can we be sure? But in this case, we are sure that there was no foul play involved.
Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am. I would like
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
surely be your student someday. I'm from
Well,
India.
you know
I'm
what?
studying BSc Forensic Science.
Yeah, you know what?
Uh,
Contact me. You can contact me through. I hope maybe I can do another session. It would be great. I love teaching. I love presenting. Great questions. And it just shows the investigative process. That's what you're thinking. And that's how I think too. So it's better to think that way than not, because then you can have the evidence and it disproves your thinking, right? And it's really a good thing, because we don't want to go down that everybody is out to get everybody else. So, but no, those were great questions.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Even by that way, I got an idea to organize a soon lecture from Terri about the career counseling in how to become a forensic science investigator.
Perfect. That would be perfect. We'll schedule that. That would be my honor, my pleasure. Yes.
Yeah. So, Mohammed Khaja, you can ask your question. Bontu Srinath. Deepak Dahiya.
Yes, may be liable if it had safety measures put in place, but Mr. Menes was negligent.
I'm sorry, what's your question, sir?
All right. I said, would the company be liable if it had safety measures put in place, but whereas Mr. Menes was negligent? And secondly, was there no CCTV camera in the company to ascertain what actually happened?
No, there wasn't any external methods of showing exactly what had happened during that event. And Mr. Jimenez, he could have been, it's all speculation. He could have been responsible for his own death, but there wasn't any evidence pointing for that, because again, nobody saw him really go in. Obviously he was pulled through, but where he was standing, we don't know. We don't know if he was standing in front of, feeding the chipper, or he's standing on the side as they were all trained. But what we do know is there were no safety measures to prevent anybody from standing in the front and getting pulled through. So again, that was a mitigating factor, and that was ultimately found that Moorpark was responsible for not having that. Now, if you look at it, like I said before, you look at a wood chipper now, it's got safety measures everywhere. So, and next time, when I first got a hold of this case and recognized that and was involved in that, and I look at wood chippers now and I see when they're doing it, I see they're off to the side. The operators are off to the side. It's funny how if you look at recognized or have been exposed or involved with a particular case, then you start looking at the nuances and say, is this person really doing it that way? Or is that, because you don't want that person to do that. So you start looking at things like that. So I think we're all aware of what not to do once we've been involved in a case, at least presented a case.
Deepak Dahiya, you can ask your question.
Thank you, Doctor. First of all, thank you very much, Ms. Terri. Being a law enforcement employee, I want to ask one question. At the time of trial session, the defense counsel maybe asked some question like, as you told all the audiences that there is no forensic report regarding the toxicology and other reports. Based on these facts, as you told, that particularly solely on the preference of personal identification, we can't say that it is a case of homicide, suicide, or it is a case of negligence. What do you want to say on this point?
Case of negligence. So because of
Is it audible?
Terri, I think it's muted from your side.
Sorry. It's just because I was hearing some feedback. So I think somebody else was talking. So it's the case of negligence. I should, what I'll do is I will, I have the actual report and I will send it, if you want, I can send it to
Yeah.
And then, but it does show negligence on the part of Moorpark, not on the part of Mr. Jimenez. So, yeah, that, like I said, it was a civil matter that was settled in court.
But
And
there is a
that was settled
possibility
for.
of toxication of the diseased person, Mr. As you told.
I'm sorry,
There is a
sir.
possibility of intoxication, some chemical substance by the disease.
No, I'm sorry, go ahead, go ahead. You're
My
talking about,
question is that there is a also, I'm talking about the possibility of intoxication of some chemical substance by the diseased person, because there is a no toxicology report.
correct, there is no toxicology report.
Yeah. So,
Ma'am, I would like to clarify his question. Like, I mean,
Yes.
he is asking that was there any possibility that the person had been intoxicated before working?
Got it, thank you. No, there is no indication that he was under any type of influence because they had interviewed his coworkers before he and his work partner went out. There was no indication that, let's say your typical thing, alcohol. There was no indication of that. They interviewed Mrs. Jimenez. That wasn't the point at all. So there was no evidence pointing us to the direction of maybe he was intoxicated. No.
thank you, Terry. But if we look in the scenario of Indian culture or Indian society, or like if this case will happen or was happened in India, then first of all, the specimens, or you can say that the evidence will be sent to the forensic laboratories for the toxicology report. But in your country, why it is not possible? Because only you make your decision especially based on your preferences, that you said you personally interview the different witnesses at that point.
Well, I can't attest to or testify to why it was and was not done. This is, I'm not at that point. I was not involved in the decision making why it was or was not done. In 2008, we can be as again this the Monday day quarterback. What should be done? There are many processes that, for instance, in the O.J. Simpson case, it should have been done this way, and now it is done that way. In 2008, it should have been done this way, but now we do it this way. So it is a process of covering all aspects of investigation. I can't go back and say, well, you know what, we didn't do it. That's what it is, and that's it. Did we make a mistake? I don't know that. All I can tell you is what bringing forward the facts to you, and that's what was done. In this day, in 2020, would that have been done now? Probably, right? Because the stakes are a little bit higher now. Things, investigative processes are a little bit more fine-tuned now. So if you compare cases that we've done now versus cases how it used to be done, let's say back in the 1950s, everybody knows the Sam Shepard case, all that was done in 1950s, those processes would never fly today because of the risk of cross-contamination. The process of investigation wasn't very thorough, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, in hindsight, probably, but that's what it is. Unfortunately, Mr. Jimenez lost his life, and it was litigated in such a manner that, as I said before, the safety measures were the most important aspect of it, and those were the ones that were absent of it. So, and who's to say that if this individual was intoxicated under influence of something, who's to say that he may not have lost his life if the safety measures were in place? I don't know. I'm good, but I can't go back in the past, nor can I predict the future.
Ajay, you can ask your question.
All right. Good day, ma'am. My question is, how come his shoes were in place? The shoes were not molded up like the body tissues that we saw in the pictures. How are we sure his body was not chopped and dropped into the wood chipper?
Because his shoes here, and I don't know if it's there as well, but the workers have steel-toed shoes made of steel, okay? So they're so hard that they didn't go through. So they were sheared off, broken off at the ankle. So those did not go through because they're steel-toed. So it protected his both of his feet.
Okay, I thought the shoes went into the wood chipper as well. I didn't know these
No.
ones fell off. All right, thank
Yeah,
you.
they were just kind of, they were if you can imagine a pencil or a tree branch, if something's really firm and can't feed through it, right? Because bone and tissue, but it was encased or surrounded by the steel covering, which is the steel shoe. They're called steel-toed shoes. They're very heavy, but guess what? You look at that, the steel-toed shoes protected his feet, right? So anything were to have fallen on his feet would have been protected. And in this case, for us, evidence-wise, they were. In most industry or most workers, they're going to be wearing steel-toed shoes.
Noted. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So by this, I'm just going to close today's session. And I would like to thank Dr. Terri for such a wonderful lecture and explaining the case and making the session more interactive, answering all the questions of the participant. And by this way, I like to present you one certificate of appreciation. Although we are in a virtual space, but kindly accept as a real certificate from our side.
Thank you.
Yeah. By this way, I like to thank my team members for their support, for reaching to the social media, and my dedicated team for posting into the different group, WhatsApp, Facebook, for reaching to people so that maximum people can be benefited by this. And I request my team member to accept their appreciation certificate also, working as a volunteer. Kritika Mishra, Vaishnavi, Lakshya, Tanya, Janita, Pooja, Kailash, Sudhakar, Nitika. I like to thank all the supporter who has supported us for continuing this workshop, to continuing this international lecture series. And soon we are going to organize more and more in the future. And we plan to organize this whole year on every Sunday from the different international speaker with a different knowledge, and they can share the more and more, and the fraternity can be benefited from the all over the globe. So by this, all those who have requested for the certificate, they will get their certificate within 24 hours. And your certificate will be look like this. And by this, I like to announce the next lecture, which is on the 7th June. And Carlos is going to take a lecture on the next, and crime scene investigation and new technology on the 3D methodology and other things. And he's going to deliver the lecture on 7th June. So soon we'll publish our this registration link on the social media, so you all can register for this session again and get benefited. I would like to request Terri to give a concluding remark.
Everybody, thank you, good evening, and thank you for spending this time with me. It is truly an honor and a pleasure. I enjoyed your questions, your attention. I hope to present again. And those of you who've reached out to me on Facebook or other social medias, just please be patient. I will get to you. And if you have any questions, please reach out. I'm here to help in any manner, answer any questions, and help you, sir, too, any information that I can provide to everyone, to participants, students, experts. I'm here to help.